Hello. Good afternoon, Lise. Thank you very much for allowing me to interview you in the Facebook Live series of interviews with interesting leaders, where I ask questions about what it means for you to exert your leadership with purpose. So I want to introduce Lise Fuhr to our audience. She's the Director General of ETNO, the European Telecommunications Network Operators, the Association of Telecom Operators in Europe, I should say. Lisa and I know each other because she's the board chair of Public Interest Registry, which again in turn is the wholesale level operator for the .org as well as the .ngo internet domain names. And maybe, dear audience, you know that a couple of days ago I also interviewed Jay Daly, who is also one of our board members. So the mission of PIR, Public Interest Registry, is to provide a safe, trusted and effective web presence for about 10.5 million customers in the world, 80% of whom are NGOs and nonprofits. And 50% or so of all the revenues that we create through, at the wholesale level, selling these internet domain names that so many of us in civil society use, goes directly to the Internet Society, which is an important nonprofit that supports the mission, that has the mission of making the internet, again, accessible to all people in the world, very importantly, as well as a safe and trusted global good. And I cannot think of almost anything more important than that at this point in society. So, Lisa and I know each other because we're both on the board of PIR. So Lisa, let me move to my first questions. For many people in my professional community of international NGOs who are not focused, thinking that much about effective web presence, probably beyond important things like fundraising and a couple of other functions, they don't really think about the infrastructure of the internet and what are the actors within that, government actors, private sector actors, and civil society. So tell us a little bit more about what ETNO does and what is its place in that internet infrastructure.
Okay, yeah, well, ETNO is the European Trade Association that actually has the office in Brussels.
Okay.
What we do is we represent the main European telcos in Brussels, trying to advocate for their interest in Brussels. And also what we do, which is also important, is we have a lot of working groups that are exchanging best practices. And the members, my members are like Deutsche Telekom, it's British Telecom, it's Orange, it's Telefonica, and many more. We have members from all over Europe.
Yeah.
They deliver the crucial infrastructure for the domain name structure too. So our members are actually laying out fiber, building mobile networks. They are also, of course, selling telephony to end users. So they have both the infrastructure, plus they sell the services, the data connections, but also the speech and
all of it. And all of it. Through that, from the vantage point of this interview, European civil society organizations both access the internet, right? That's I think important for this discussion. And so telcos again are telecommunications companies in the private sector, right?
Yes.
Yes. No, that's all right. I just want to make sure that our audience understands the terms we use. So your work experience has been both with mission-oriented non-profits and NGOs as well as in the private sector. And, as I already said, you're the board chair of PIR, which has a non-profit legal status and mission that we explained earlier. So to what extent do you think that leaders in the public, whether government or non-government sectors, and the private sectors need to think and behave differently in order to be effective within their space? Are there differences there in terms of their actions and behaviors? And where are there no difference?
Yeah, because that was going to be my first answer. Is I think both are areas where you behave alike. So
Okay.
you should have the same kind of leadership style. There are other areas where you need to find another way of managing a team because of the differences of being a non-profit and a for-profit. I've worked both in the government, I worked for a non-profit, and I'm now in a trade association. I also worked in a private company, so I've tried a whole range of
across sectors.
Across sectors. For me, in a non-profit, what is different is you don't have the target of getting as much revenue as possible. So that's not the driver. So non-profit is often needs another focus to stay efficient and also to have the initiative to keep moving and getting better. But if you look at PIR, it would not be a problem here because we are serving ISOC. So
Yes.
for every domain name, we actually give a lot of money to ISOC.
You do. We
so,
do.
That part is a good driver and a good incitament. What do you call it?
An incentive?
Incentive.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. That's right.
And on the other hand, handling a team in a non-profit and in a for-profit, for me, it's the same when you talk about how you manage people. So you should be as transparent, as inclusive, as clear in your leadership style, if it's a non-profit or a for-profit.
That doesn't matter. Okay.
It doesn't matter. And I think for me, the leadership style is actually the most important point here. So it's more when you set the vision, when you set the goals in a non-profit, there is a difference because you don't have the incentive of actually getting as much revenue as possible, whereas much of the vision for companies is they have to earn money for their stakeholders. In the end, they are the owners. Of course, you need also a vision of we want to be the best in the market, or we want to innovate the most, or how you want to frame it. But there is a difference in how you set up your vision and mission.
And can I just follow up on one thing you said early on? Namely, you said in the case of nonprofits, we don't have an easy incentive to focus on efficiency compared to the private sector. In your experience in organizations with a nonprofit mission, how have you as a leader tried to still ensure enough focus on efficiency, not only effectiveness? It's not so straightforward.
And it's not. And for me, you're right. Efficiency and effectiveness is not necessarily equals. And for me, it's been setting a target that has been measurable, and also trying to be clear in why we need to go this way, because
the rationale
is important, because if you don't have the rationale as a team member, you don't have I don't believe you will have the right incentive, because you don't understand why you should go there. So I think giving the rationale, building a path that is not necessarily straight from A to B, but also understanding that things goes in loops sometimes. You have a strategy, it develops, and you need to be adaptable. And for me, it's actually the key word in all of this is with a rationale, with an open mind to there are different ways to go to achieve a certain goal. You actually can have a team that is high performing, because it allows for them also to bring their own ideas and to push forward for the end goal.
And a little bit more still on what you said in the beginning of this last answer, which is on in order to be efficient for nonprofits, then they have to have metrics, things that are measurable. Now, sometimes people who focus a lot on measurement and evaluation will say, in the case of nonprofits, we need to make, and not just actually in their case, but let me focus on that, you need to be careful with quantitative
Yes.
measures, because the things that one can measure relatively easily, that are straightforward to measure, are not necessarily the things that nonprofits that are meaningful from a mission perspective. How have you resolved that as a nonprofit leader?
I actually believe you should do both. So you should never have only a metric. You should have other ways of setting goals. So it's good to have some things that are measurable, but also the more soft goals or more difficult to assess goals are important. So I'm not saying either or, I'm saying we should do both.
And?
And, yes.
Okay. So fairly frequently, leaders in the NGO sector, particularly in the US it seems to me, are told that they have to emulate, that they have to imitate business approaches to management, organizational management and leadership. I myself have mixed feelings about that. So let me turn that question, or that claim, that statement on its head and say, what can private sector leaders learn from NGO leaders, you think?
Actually, what I think NGO leaders has is that they often have very dedicated people and very dedicated teams. And I think if you actually can try and mirror that into the private sector in a way, that could be interesting. I believe that you also have very dedicated teams in the private sector.
Absolutely.
What I think is interesting with non-profit organizations is that they often have a lot of voluntary work, and it's a lot of people doing this because they are interested in achieving a goal for a common good.
Yeah.
And I think if we can actually also have this for private companies, it would actually create higher satisfactions among employees.
But then I imagine you're implying that you have to then come up with goals that communicate that the company is not just there to sell to customers and enhance the bottom line in terms of people who own stocks, but that the company has a broader role in society, not of a nonprofit mission, but of still does some kind of social good.
No, but and I think you're right about this. I think bottom line is of course key for stakeholders, but for all the corporate social responsibility work is also important, both for the end users, but also for the company itself, for the employees. So I believe we have some members in the telco sector that are very much into environmental issues, and they have what they call green bonds. So it's about saving energy and being very cautious of not polluting and helping the environment as such. So and that is for me a good way of going, both for the employee, because you get this proudness of being part of some company that's trying to both have a revenue and a bottom line that's that's good, but also doing something for common good, doing something for your kids, your family, your friends, your environment. So it's I think there is a double effect in doing this, and we also have a company that's actually trying to put this into their annual accounts. So they report on what they do, and they actually find that it's an important part of reporting back.
Interesting. That's really interesting. So let me pivot a little bit now and ask a little bit about women as leaders in the tech sector, and particularly in the internet infrastructure world. We just had International Women's Day and so on, so I thought I would ask you that. So, to what extent are women less represented than men in your part of the internet infrastructure world?
In the telecommunication business, there are not many female CEOs, there are very few. But in Brussels, in the trade associations, there are there are a lot of women. So a lot of the top leaders in all the tech trade associations are in fact women. And for me, that's an interesting development.
Yeah.
I think part of it is because women have been good at doing advocacy, and women has been good at also good leaders, just as men are good leaders. And I think many of the companies are much more traditional, and they haven't seen the light yet. I know many of our companies are working with this, but there are still lacking women at the top level.
It's really interesting because trade associations are a part of civil society, right? Even though they consist of private sector actors as an association, just like any other professional association, they are part of civil society. And that's where you see a lot of women represent in higher management leadership, not in the private sector, but the private sector is in your area. You're seeing more sensitivity to that now developing.
Yes, I do, and it's not that because it's often said that women are not becoming top leaders because they don't have they won't put in the hours for it. I know all the women that works in Brussels, they put in a lot of hours, so it's not that part, but I think it's just I think it will come in the companies too in the future, but I'm not seeing this in the next 5 years. Maybe 10 years we'll have much more women, but it's not.
That's interesting.
It's not around the corner. But I have no evidence of this. It's just a feeling.
Yeah. And I don't know to what extent you can say something about this, but as you, as an individual leader, interact with your members, the actual companies, right? Do you lead in a certain way in order to be effective in that male-dominated space?
I do believe I lead different. I think it's always important to adapt to who you talk with. And I am certainly talking to a room full of men in a different way than I would do to a room full of women. And to be honest, I actually haven't thought about it before you were asking me about this, but I know I do communicate differently. And I'm trying... I'm actually trying. They want more speed. They want more concrete actions and facts than for a room full of women. I'm more open for discussions. So it's actually, and they're more open for discussion. So it's. I think that diversity is important of this reason. And to be honest, I don't think this is a matter of DNA. I think it's upbringing. I think this is just a way we have built culture around women, we've built culture around men, and there are different expectations to men and women. And I'm seeing this changing in some part of the world, other parts are not changing. Europe is very focused on this, and for me it's good. It's good that we try to get more women in top positions, not only just for women to be there, but actually because I think it makes a difference.
And there's more and more research that shows that it directly supports the bottom line. It directly supports innovation, for instance, because of the diversity of thinking that you will have in a team. Yeah, that's really interesting. And in fact, my next question builds on this. So let me try it, but if you feel that you've answered it, we can move right along. So some people say that women are more prone to have certain leadership traits than men do, or different ones, right? Others reject that statement because they say that kind of essentializes women, it kind of reduces us to our biology, right, in a way that is not warranted and actually potentially dangerous. You've already commented a little bit. Is there something else that you want to say to that, or would you like me to move on?
No, but actually I think it's interesting because I've seen women who are trying to mirror the male leadership style. And for me, that doesn't work for me. It might work for other women to say, okay, I'm just playing the same ball game. I've actually tried both to, I do adapt, but I'm not mirroring. So that's, for me, important. I adapt to another style of leadership towards a room full of men than a room full of women. And a mixed crowd is actually ideal for me because there I can play it much more, it's more inspiring for me. So I feel that if I'm to look at all of it, it gives me a boost to have different interactions with the two gender. So it's for me essential that I stay still feminine. I'm still wearing a dress. I'm still trying to accommodate my own leadership style, even though I adapt. And I'm again certain that all this will change with the new generations again because they have been brought up differently.
Yeah.
I have two sons. They have been brought up with a mother who's actually very active and I've been working their whole life.
Yeah.
So it's for me a generational thing, and it's also a cultural thing. And I don't know how it will look like in 10 years, but I'm a strong believer it will be different and women will be more in charge and have more leadership top positions.
And maybe one additional thought that even if you look at the thinking of younger generation millennials around gender and gender fluidity, when it comes to societal expectations, are less willing to embrace that either, right? They're not thinking about it in such a dichotomy or binary way.
Exactly.
Well, then maybe finally is I called this series of Facebook Live interviews "Leading with Meaning." So, what is the meaning for you in your leadership? Where do you find purpose in your leadership?
I actually find my best purpose in leading high performance teams, and not high performance in that we're just looking at the end goal all the time, but a team where you have the feeling that we're all working together for the same goal. I find really good meaning in making people grow because I love to actually see people develop their skills, the way they interact with other people. I think for me, I lose a lot of good team members because they become so good that they actually leave to other positions. And while it's hard to have people leave, it's also the biggest compliment for the team that we can actually send someone onwards to another good position. Yeah. So my meaning is twofold. I need to relate to what I'm doing, so it's important for me. I actually love technology. I think it's super interesting. I think the technology interaction with society is very interesting. Yeah. I think what I'm doing now is working for telcos, where I see they have a crucial role in developing Europe. I work for European Association, and actually trying to spread that narrative in Europe, it gives me a good meaning that we're an important part of an ecosystem that can benefit both the companies and also the citizens. I'm also, like I'm saying, this is not me doing it. I have a team, and the interaction with my team every day is key for me. Because they actually, in a lot of issues, they're much smarter than me. So they teach me something every day, and I hope that I teach them something every day.
I'm sure you do. And what I found really neat in your last answer is that in my past work at Syracuse University on leadership development, we both studied and then talked with senior leaders in INGOs about this concept of post-heroic leadership, which is one kind of articulation of what some people say is feminist leadership. And post-heroic leadership says that men and women both should be interested in at least two concepts of leadership or towards leadership approach. One is shared leadership within teams, etc. And the other thing is on that post-heroic leaders are very focused on developing other people in the organization. And your first two of the third sets of meaning that you just told me are exactly about that. So I think that's really neat. Well, thank you so much, Lise, for this interview. It's been my absolute pleasure to do it. It's been my absolute pleasure to be on the board with you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, and likewise. It's been a great pleasure, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you in this interview.
Good, very good. Well, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.